Well, everybody, it's time for a Dragon Ball history lesson. Let's dive into this complicated timeline and see if we can make some sense of it. So, first things first, let's establish how exactly Dragon Ball history works. I don't know if you haven't figured this out from the dinosaurs or the flying cars, but this franchise doesn't take place in the present day. In fact, it doesn't seem like the timeline runs in any way parallel to ours. So that means that trying to establish a connection to our type of real-world calendar is pretty much impossible. Luckily, we don't need to because Dragon Ball has their very own. The Dragon Ball calendar doesn't work quite like our own. Instead of saying the year is 2020, the DB calendar would call this age 2020. The age calendar starts over 700 years before the series began. We don't really know what started this calendar or what happened in Age 1, but we do know quite a bit about what happened before and after that year. The trouble is that there are quite a few holes in our knowledge of Dragon Ball history. That's mostly because the characters in the series are much more interested in saving the world than learning about it. Hopefully someday there will come an episode where somebody asks Gohan to explain the ancient history of the world. Pretty sure he's the only one in the series who's actually read a book. So we're gonna have to Sherlock Holmes a lot of information about the timeline from the random bits and pieces we've gotten over the years. How hard could that be? So what makes the Dragon Ball timeline even more confusing is that there isn't just one. You see, Future Trunks really messed things up when he selfishly decided to mess with the timeline just so he could save the entire human race. Some people are so inconsiderate of anime historians. In Dragon Ball Z, Future Trunks went back to the past to save Goku and the gang from the scourge of the androids. In doing so, he didn't really change the future, but rather created a completely new timeline. This gets even more confusing when he started leaping back and forth randomly throughout the series. Wouldn't that just continually create new timelines each time he did it? Things get kind of better and kind of worse in Dragon Ball Super when Future Trunks does it again to stop Goku Black. This time, the powers that be discover that Trunks had been messing around with things, and Lord Zeno completely eradicated the alternate timeline. So everything's back to normal, right? Wrong. In the end, Future Trunks returns to his timeline, only now it's a completely different alternate timeline that already has a Future Trunks and a Future Mai. This one took place before Zamasu went all crazy, so the Earth is still good. Well, by Future Trunks standards anyway. So let's just focus on the main timeline and let Future Trunks and other Future Trunks settle that mess out for themselves. As far as our purposes go, where exactly does the first episode of Dragon Ball start in the age calendar? Well, that would be age 749. This year was actually pretty mild compared to all the ones that came after it. In fact, the big events of the OG Dragon Ball season seems nice and quaint compared to the universe-obliterating threats that Goku and company would face years later. Now, back in 49, the biggest worries were collecting those Dragon Balls to keep them out of the clutches of Emperor Pilaf and his cronies. This was the year where Goku met Bulma and started his journey. It was also the year that he met Master Roshi, Yamcha, Oolong, and the most important Dragon Ball character of all time, Boss Rabbit. It also featured the very first appearance of Shenron in the series, though it is still hilarious that the first use of his almighty powers was just Oolong's weird fantasy. I imagine when Goku's days are done, the historians of Dragon Ball will consider everything before the year 749 pretty peaceful by comparison. I bet every year after that gets recounted as AG or after Goku. If you wanted to include non-canonical Dragon Ball stories like the movies or Dragon Ball GT as parallel timelines, all of this gets even more confusing. How exactly do you chart out a history for a world when there are like 7 worlds happening at the same time? That's less like a timeline and more like Charlie from It's Always Sunny trying to find Pepe Sylvia. He's got boxes of Pepe. It doesn't help that Dragon Ball GT messed up the continuity itself with its English dub. You see, the GT series was supposed to take place 5 years after Dragon Ball Z ended. That makes sense considering the fact that all of the characters seem to age about 5 years. Instead, the dub said that the series took place 10 years later, which doesn't make much sense at all. Of course, that would make Pan's adventure into space with her grandfather a lot more acceptable. Who brings a 10-year-old on a dangerous intergalactic mission? Goku really should never be allowed to babysit. It's probably better that this is no longer canon. So for our official history, let's only count the canonical events. That's probably safer. One of the other things that tends to confuse people about the Dragon Ball timeline is that some characters are a lot older than they should be. That's because several of them hung out inside the hyperbolic time chamber that exists outside of time almost entirely. One normal day outside is equal to an entire year inside the chamber. Over the years, many characters have taken long training holidays inside the chamber to prepare for a big battle against whatever supervillain was looking to destroy Earth that year. Gohan went in there looking like a pipsqueak and came out ready to destroy Cell. That was probably the most impressive time chamber success story to date. Honestly, we might not even know how old Vegeta and Goku are at this point. We've seen them pop in and out of that chamber so many times that it's possible that both of them are pushing 70. A very fit 70, but still. So when calculating the ages of characters, it's probably wise to put in more than a grain or two of salt. Goku is physically 31 at the start of Dragon Ball Z, but due to the time chamber shenanigans, he's actually around 38, though even that may be wrong. If they reveal that Goku sometimes goes in there just to hide from Chi-Chi for a year, I really wouldn't be surprised. I probably would too. The Future Trunks time travel issues are certainly confusing, but it's easy to just contain that confusion to the two arcs that he appears in. It's not like there was a completely different time manipulation sequence that throws the whole concept of time in the series completely off. Oh, wait, yeah, there's that one time where Whis casually showed us that he could reverse time in Resurrection F. Apparently, throughout the entire franchise of potentially world-ending events, it was possible to reverse these for a do-over the entire time. Not only that, but Whis' extraordinary ability to change time itself is limited to only 3 minutes. It's very much the Galaxy Quest style of time travel, where you have the immense power to bend space-time itself, only for that to be limited to an arbitrary amount of change. Of course, I subscribe to the theory that Whis was just lying about the whole 3-minute thing. He does have a habit of only revealing his powers when it's convenient. Now we had our best on-staff CBR physicist analyze how exactly Whis does this and why it's limited to just 3 minutes. I was really hoping to come to you with an answer to this question, but he made it halfway through his calculations and he quit. Perhaps the science behind how fictional angels manipulate time is just beyond our understanding. Fans of just Dragon Ball Z and Dragon Ball Super might not be the biggest fans of the World Martial Arts Tournament. For those that watched the original Dragon Ball, they know that those original tournaments were the coolest things ever. Way before Saiyans, Frieza, or Beerus, the most exciting thing in the series were these intense showdowns between the greatest fighters on Earth. We might have warriors like Jiren now who make gods shake in their boots, but back then, a guy could thrill us with just a weird special move that seemingly made him invincible. So when talking about Dragon Ball history, we have to talk about the very first World Martial Arts Tournament. This tournament started in age 650. Unfortunately, we don't know who competed in it, but I like to think that it was actually a standard martial arts tournament. Maybe back in the day, there weren't any giant apes or energy blasts causing mayhem. Back then, there could have just been a group of martial artists squaring off against each other just like an Ip Man. You know that it had the exact same announcer too, though. That guy was probably doing that job when he was a teenager. Same suit and sunglasses, too. There are a lot of awesome elderly characters in Dragon Ball. Not every franchise has a guy as old as Roshi fighting alongside his younger counterparts to save the universe. Say what you want about Roshi's place in the series, but you didn't see Michael Douglas fighting Thanos in Avengers Endgame. He is nowhere near that Roshi level. It might surprise you to learn that Roshi's not actually the oldest human character in the series, though. Nope, that honor goes to his older sister, fortune teller Baba. Baba's place in the series has dropped considerably, unlike Roshi's, but she still pops up in the background every once in a while. Back in Dragon Ball, the witch was used to help Goku and the gang find Dragon Balls. She ran quite the racket back then, charging tens of thousands of zenny for her fortune-telling skills. If you couldn't quite cough up the cash, there was an alternate way to gain her favor. You had to fight her 5 henchmen to prove yourself worthy. I guess when you're the oldest lady on the planet, you can get away with some unconventional business strategies. I really hope there's a real-life fortune teller who makes you challenge your bodyguards for the right to a fortune. I would go there immediately and probably lose. She's got a mummy, and a werewolf, and the Invisible Man. The great thing about the Dragon Ball series is that it is in no way contained just to the anime and movies. There are hundreds of volumes of manga to read, dozens of action figures, and a wide variety of video games that go to some pretty interesting places. And no, I'm not talking about you, Raging Blast. Specifically, I'm talking about the Xenoverse series, which takes a fascinating look at a potential Dragon Ball future. Most Dragon Ball games take their stories from the main series. Games like Sagas and Kakarot try to retell the famous moments from the franchise alone. Xenoverse tells its own story with a main character that you design. In this timeline, there are villains who are messing with Dragon Ball's history. A version of future Trunks who's joined something called the Time Patrol enlists your character to fix it. This leads to several fascinating alternate timelines and futures for the series that you should check out if you haven't already. As much as I love the series though, it's no Fighter Z. That game is up there with Budokai 3 as one of the all-time greats. So, if we're talking about the history of a franchise called Dragon Ball, then we should probably touch on when those Dragon Balls were actually created. The franchise revealed to us that these magical orbs of destiny were created in age 470. These were created by Kami to give humans more hope after the original reign of King Piccolo ended. It was essentially his way of apologizing to humanity for that whole awkward business of his evil half causing unbelievable destruction. It's unclear whether or not he created Shenron, or if this is just some kind of deal he and Shenron made with each other for all-powerful wishes. Ultimately, Kami regretted his choice to give humanity such awesome power. That is, before he met the good-hearted Goku, who reminded him that there was hope in humanity after all. But, well, you know, Goku's technically a Saiyan, but I think it still counts. There's one aspect of Dragon Ball Z that bothers hardcore fans so much that I don't think they've stopped fighting about it since it happened. The Goku vs. Frieza fight is for many the peak of the entire franchise, and it isn't hard to see why. Not only was it an amazing fight, but it also featured that very first Super Saiyan transformation. It also had Goku fighting against someone who was the ultimate representation of everything he stands against. This was Goku's ultimate hero moment. Too bad it kinda doesn't make a lot of sense though. Their final bout is incredibly epic, but it also supposedly takes place over only 5 minutes. Frieza announced that he'd destroy Namek and that the planet only had that long until it went kablamo. The only problem is that the fight continued on for several episodes after that. So how could so many episodes last that short an amount of time? Well, the easiest explanation is that we were seeing through Frieza and Goku's perspectives. They were moving at such high speeds that it's possible that 5 minutes for them were the equivalent of several hours for us. That works well for this fight, but doesn't make a lot of sense for the fights coming afterwards. As powerful as the two were, they're nothing compared to the power levels we see today. If we adjusted every fight by this super speed logic, then the Tournament of Power would have lasted as long as a blink. We actually know that the Tournament of Power lasted roughly an hour, which would have been several weeks if not months by this super speed metric. And that's why I go with this simpler solution. Frieza was just wrong about his calculations. Do we really expect him to know exactly how long a planet has left down to the second? Pretty sure his math was just a bit off. But then again, he has a lot of practice destroying planets, so who knows? If you're really hungry for some more Dragon Ball action and unhappy with the long wait for the next inevitable series, there's actually a pretty fun alternative. Super Dragon Ball Heroes is an anime created for the game series of the same name. It features the same cast along with villains and heroes from across the entire Dragon Ball series, canon or not. For instance, this series features cool Dragon Ball nerd scenarios like Cooler becoming Golden Cooler. This series has a completely different timeline from the main series. It features all sorts of weird scenarios and cool twists on the Dragon Ball formula. The series also features characters that you might not recognize, like Dragon Ball's own Bane cosplayer, Cumber. While some fans dislike it for frequently breaking the rules of the series and not having anything to do with the main continuity, it is a fun what-if series that can break up the monotony of waiting for the next anime. Dragon Ball already has so many alternate timelines and stories. What's one more? Everybody at this point knows that the main planet of the Saiyans was planet Vegeta. This is where King Vegeta reigned before Frieza decided to blow it up to prove his worth as a budding galactic warlord. To be fair, blowing up planets is a tried-and-true method of accomplishing this task. What might surprise you is to learn that the Saiyans don't actually come from planet Vegeta. Nope, there was a time when the world was known as Planet Plant. This version of Planet Vegeta was inhabited by a race called the Tuffles. These aliens were much weaker than the Saiyans, but much smarter. In age 720, the Saiyans began their campaign to conquer the world after their homeworld was destroyed. The conflict lasted a whole decade, with the Tuffles putting up a brave fight against their more powerful foes. Ultimately, in age 730, the Saiyans succeeded in their campaign and declared Planet Plant to be their new world. Then they renamed it after their king, and they enjoyed it for only about 7 years before the karma train came chugging their way and it was destroyed. Hopefully those 7 years were worth it though. Somehow, I doubt it. King Vegeta did get a real comfy pillow though. Oh, right. If you can't tell by now, the Dragon Ball continuity is a bit of a mess. There are several contradictions and paradoxes that are woven together into the history of the series. Unfortunately, some of these problems come from the later episodes of the franchise. Beerus mentions in Super that he visited Earth once before. In a cool line that demonstrates just how much of a threat Beerus is, he claims that he was responsible for wiping out the dinosaurs. The only problem? There are tons of dinosaurs in the series. They're like deer in Dragon Ball's version of Earth. What, did Dr. Brief make his own version of Jurassic Park that reintroduced them into the environment like the ending of Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom? Honestly, though, Beerus doesn't seem like the most organized god of destruction out there. I would 100% believe that he destroyed the dinosaurs on another planet and merely got it confused with Earth. That guy really needs to get himself a personal assistant who isn't Whis. It can be really hard to track how old these Dragon Ball characters are. With so much hyperbolic time chamber nonsense and the fact that Goku's aging like Clooney, it's no wonder why Bulma and Chi-Chi are so sensitive about their age. One of the characters that's the hardest to pin down is Frieza. Sometimes the evil pipsqueak acts like a petulant child who was granted power far too early. In fact, for most of the series, I theorized that he was basically a super powerful child all along. Turns out I was completely wrong. Frieza's actually over 70 years old by Earth metrics. Now that might still be young by his people's standards, but I never would have clocked him as being in the Robert De Niro age range. Of course, Master Roshi is over 300, so maybe that's not as impressive in the Dragon Ball universe. Well folks, there you have it. All the things you needed to know about the Dragon Ball timeline. What do you guys think about Dragon Ball's crazy history? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe to CBR. As always, thanks a lot for watching.